The best birthday present would be you disappearing from my life. The words hung in the air of Carrie's luxurious Manhattan apartment, suspended between us like a physical thing. My 24-year-old daughter didn't even look up from her phone as she delivered this blow, her manicured fingers continuing to scroll through Instagram as if she hadn't just shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. "Carrie, I just wanted to discuss your birthday plans," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "The reservation at Le Bernardin needs to be confirmed by tomorrow." She sighed dramatically, finally glancing up with thinly veiled annoyance. "Fine. Whatever. Book it. Just make sure they know about my dietary restrictions this time. Last year was humiliating." I nodded, making a mental note even as my mind reeled from her earlier statement. This beautiful young woman with her perfect blonde hair and curated wardrobe had once been a giggly toddler who wouldn't sleep unless I was holding her hand. Now she could barely stand to be in the same room with me unless I was opening my wallet. "And Mom?" she added, her tone softening artificially, the voice she used when she wanted something. "I've been thinking about what I want for my 25th. Trevor mentioned this investment opportunity." Of course. Trevor Walters, the entrepreneur boyfriend with his slick suits and empty promises. I'd been writing checks to fund his ventures for the past year, money that disappeared into the black hole of his ambition while he encouraged Carrie's worst instincts. "We can discuss that later," I said, gathering my purse. "I should go. You clearly have plans." "Actually, Trevor's coming over in an hour," she replied, already returning her attention to her phone. "So yeah, you should probably head out." The dismissal was so casual, so complete. As I let myself out of the apartment I'd paid for, with its panoramic views of Central Park that cost more per month than my professor's salary, a strange calm began to settle over me. It wasn't the calm of acceptance, but the stillness that comes when something fundamental finally breaks beyond repair. On the elevator ride down, I thought about the jewelry set waiting in my safe at home. Vintage pieces that had belonged to Richard's grandmother, intended as Carrie's birthday present. Alongside them was the letter I'd finally written after decades of secrets, revealing the truth I should have told her years ago. At home, I poured a glass of wine and sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by familiar books and the photographs chronicling a life devoted to a daughter who wasn't biologically mine. The largest frame held a picture of Richard and me on our wedding day, both of us young and hopeful, 12 years before his affair would test our marriage beyond anything we could have imagined. I picked up my phone and called Sarah, my oldest friend and the only person who knew the complete truth. "She wants me to disappear," I said when she answered, not bothering with a greeting. Sarah's sigh carried through the phone. "What happened this time?" I recounted the conversation, including Trevor's latest scheme to access Carrie's trust fund, the money Richard had left her, which she couldn't fully control until she turned 30. "Deanna," Sarah said finally, "you've given that girl everything. Your time, your love, your financial security, and it's never enough. She doesn't know what I've given her," I replied quietly. "That's the problem. Then maybe it's time she learned. You've protected her from the truth for 24 years. Look where that's gotten you both." After we hung up, I sat in my quiet house, surrounded by the ghosts of better days. I remembered the night Richard had confessed his brief affair with Julia, his graduate student. Remembered the shock that came 2 months later when he told me Julia was pregnant and wanted nothing to do with the baby. Remembered my impossible choice, walk away from my marriage or raise another woman's child as my own. I had chosen love, not just for Richard, but for the innocent baby who deserved a home and family. For 14 years, we'd been happy. Richard had been a devoted husband and father, his gratitude for my forgiveness evident in every thoughtful gesture and unwavering support. When he died of a sudden heart attack, Carrie and I had clung to each other in our grief. But somewhere in the decades since, something had changed. The sweet, sensitive teenager had hardened into a woman who measured her worth in designer labels and social media followers, who saw me not as the mother who had chosen her, loved her, sacrificed for her, but as a convenient ATM and occasional embarrassment. I walked to my study and opened my laptop. With methodical precision, I began canceling automatic payments, the rent on Carrie's apartment, her car lease, credit card bills, utilities, the monthly allowance that supplemented her barely there job at a PR firm, kept through connections rather than merit. Next, I drafted emails to my department chair requesting emergency personal leave, to my neighbor asking him to collect my mail, to my bank transferring funds to an account Carrie couldn't access. Finally, I called Sarah again. "I'm doing it," I said. "I'm giving her exactly what she asked for." "Deanna, are you sure? Disappearing won't solve anything." "I'm not just disappearing," I replied, a strange lightness entering my voice. "I'm leaving her the truth, all of it, the documents, the letters, everything. And if she can't handle it, then she'll finally understand what real love looks like. Not the conditional kind she's been practicing, but the kind that chooses someone over and over again, even when it breaks your heart." After hanging up, I opened my safe and removed the jewelry box and envelope. Tomorrow, I would place them on the dining room table before I walked away from the life I'd built. One last gift from a mother who had always loved her daughter enough to give her exactly what she needed, even when it wasn't what she wanted. Morning light filtered through my bedroom curtains as I packed a single suitcase. 25 years of motherhood, and I was leaving with just the essentials: clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and a few cherished books. The rest, the accumulation of a life built around family, would stay behind, along with the secrets I'd guarded for too long. I moved methodically through the house, touching familiar objects like a benediction. The reading chair where I'd nursed Carrie through childhood fevers, the kitchen table where we'd celebrated birthdays, science fair victories, college acceptance letters, the mantle with photographs chronicling her transformation from gap-toothed child to polished young woman. I selected certain photos to leave behind with the documents, ones that told a story Carrie had forgotten, or perhaps never understood. Her 5th birthday, my eyes shadowed from sleepless nights spent nursing her through pneumonia. Her high school graduation, my expression radiant with pride despite the second mortgage I'd just taken to fund her college dreams. Richard's funeral, her hand gripped tightly in mine as we faced an unimaginable future together. Sarah arrived at 10, her expression a mixture of concern and reluctant support. "You don't have to do this," she said, watching me arrange documents on the dining room table. "Yes, I do." I smoothed the edge of Julia's letter, written to Richard when she discovered her pregnancy. "She asked for this. She asked for you to disappear, not to drop a nuclear bomb on her identity." I paused, hand hovering over Carrie's original birth certificate. "She deserves the truth, Sarah. I thought I was protecting her all these years, but maybe I was just protecting myself from losing her. And now? Now I've already lost her." I placed the jewelry box in the center of the arrangement. "I'm just making it official." The envelope containing my own letter to Carrie was the last item. I'd rewritten it a dozen times, struggling to distill 24 years of complicated love into words that wouldn't sound like justification or accusation. "My dearest Carrie, by the time you read this, I will be gone, as you wished. Before I disappear from your life, there's a truth you deserve to know, one I should have shared long ago. I am not your biological mother. 24 years ago, your father had a brief relationship with Julia Reed, his graduate student. When she discovered she was pregnant, she wanted neither marriage nor motherhood. She left you with Richard and disappeared from our lives. I had a choice then: walk away from a broken marriage or open my heart to an innocent child who needed a mother. I chose you, Carrie, not from obligation, but from love. A love that grew with every sleepless night, every fever, every triumph and heartbreak we weathered together. The documents enclosed will confirm everything. Your original birth certificate, Julia's letters, the legal adoption papers, the financial records showing what maintaining your lifestyle has cost over the years. Not because I want gratitude, but because I want understanding. The jewelry was to be your birthday present. Your grandmother, Helen's sapphires. They represent a legacy of women who understood that family is created through love and choice, not merely blood. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me for keeping this truth from you, or for leaving now. I don't know if you'll ever understand that disappearing is the hardest gift I've ever given you. But I hope someday you'll remember that for 24 years, I chose you. Every day, even when it broke my heart. I have loved you enough to give you everything, including the space to discover who you are without me. Perhaps someday you'll find room in your heart for the mother who chose you, flaws and all. With eternal love, Mom. I sealed the envelope, my tears threatening to smudge the ink. Sarah squeezed my shoulder. "The car's waiting," she said softly. Are you sure about this address? I nodded, picking up my suitcase. The small coastal cottage I'd rented in Maine was as far from my academic life in New York as I could reasonably manage. Remote enough for solitude, but not so isolated that Sarah couldn't reach me if necessary. How long will you stay away? She asked as we walked to the waiting taxi. I don't know, I admitted. Until I find myself again, maybe. Or until Carrie does. And if she tries to find you? She won't. Not at first. She'll be too angry. Too hurt. I closed the taxi's trunk. If that changes, you know how to reach me. We embraced, Sarah's familiar perfume momentarily grounding me in the familiar as everything else in my life shifted. Take care of yourself for once, she whispered. The taxi pulled away from the only home Carrie had ever known, the house where I'd raised a daughter, buried a husband, and finally lost myself in the process of giving too much. As the familiar streets of our suburb gave way to highway, I felt something unexpected bloom alongside the grief, a tentative freedom. For 24 years, every decision had been filtered through the lens of motherhood. What would be best for Carrie? What would protect her? What would give her the future she deserved? Now, for the first time since a pregnant graduate student had upended my carefully planned life, I was answerable only to myself. The realization was terrifying, exhilarating, necessary. Where to, ma'am? The driver asked as we approached the train station. North, I said, watching my old life recede in the rearview mirror, as far north as the tracks will take me. The small cottage in Ogunquit, Maine, stood on a rocky bluff overlooking the Atlantic. Weathered gray shingles, blue shutters, and a wraparound porch that caught both sunrise and sunset. It was nothing like the meticulously decorated colonial I'd left behind. Nothing here reminded me of Carrie, of Richard, of the life I'd carefully constructed and then abandoned in a single day. I'd been there 3 days when Sarah called. She's been trying to reach you, she said without preamble. Her cards were declined at Bergdorf's yesterday. She's frantic. I sat on the porch swing, watching waves crash against the shoreline below. What did you tell her? That I don't know where you are, which is technically true. You didn't give me the exact address. And the house? The documents? Sarah hesitated. She hasn't been there yet, as far as I know. She's been calling everyone except me until now. Her friends, your colleagues, even Richard's old law partner. She seems to think you're just teaching her a lesson, that you'll come back when she apologizes. The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of emotional distance, Carrie suddenly wanted my attention, not out of concern for my well-being, but because her financial pipeline had been cut off. Has she mentioned Trevor? No, but I saw them arguing outside her building yesterday when I was checking on things. You're spying on my daughter? Despite everything, maternal concern flickered. Just making sure she's okay, Sarah defended. She looks fine, Deanna. Angry, but fine. After we hung up, I walked along the beach, the cold May wind whipping strands of hair across my face. What was Carrie doing right now? Had she realized yet that this wasn't a temporary punishment, but a fundamental shift? That the credit cards wouldn't suddenly reactivate? The rent wouldn't magically be paid? The monthly allowance wouldn't appear in her account? Had she gone to the house yet? Found the carefully arranged evidence of a life built on secrets and sacrifice? Part of me wanted to call her, to explain, to soften the blow that was coming. But that impulse, to protect her from consequences, to smooth her path, was precisely what had led us here. For once, I needed to protect myself instead. I'd spent the first days in Maine in a fog of grief and doubt, alternately questioning and defending my decision. But as salt air cleared my head, I began to recognize how completely I'd lost myself in motherhood. Not the healthy devotion of a parent who nurtures independence, but the martyrdom of someone who enables dependency. After Richard died, I'd substituted material indulgence for emotional connection, perhaps trying to compensate Carrie for her father's absence. Each time she'd pulled away, I'd tried to buy her back with greater generosity, creating a cycle that diminished us both. She'd become entitled. I'd become a doormat. On the 7th day, as evening approached, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Where the hell are you? Carrie's voice, tight with fury, shot through the line. My apartment manager is threatening eviction. My cards are all declined. And you're what? On some middle-aged crisis vacation? I closed my eyes, steadying myself. I gave you what you asked for, Carrie. I disappeared. This isn't funny, Mom. I have bills to pay, commitments. No, you have bills that I pay and commitments I fund, I corrected gently. There's a difference. So this is punishment for what I said? Fine. I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. Can we be adults now and fix this mess? The familiar pattern, her transgression, my forgiveness, nothing fundamentally changing. Not this time. Have you been to the house yet? I asked. A pause. No. Why would I go there? I need you to fix my accounts, not... I left something for you there. On the dining room table. What, money? Mom, I need direct deposits, not cash. My rent is... Not money, I interrupted. The truth. About everything. The silence stretched, pregnant with possibility. In that moment, I could almost see her, brow furrowed in confusion, mouth tightening with impatience, already calculating whether this trip to the suburbs was worth her time. What truth? She finally asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. What are you talking about? Go to the house, Carrie. Read what I left you. Then if you still want to talk, call Sarah. She knows how to reach me. This is ridiculous. Just tell me. I ended the call, my hand trembling. How many times had I yielded to that demanding tone, that expectation of immediate compliance? The pattern was so ingrained that even now, miles away and resolved to change, I felt the pull to acquiesce. My phone immediately rang again. I silenced it, then powered it off completely. Whatever happened next was beyond my control. I had laid the truth bare. How Carrie responded to it would reveal whether there was anything left between us worth saving. That night, I dreamt of the day we'd brought Carrie home from the hospital, her tiny, perfect fingers wrapped around mine, her newborn scent intoxicating. In the dream, Julia stood in the corner of the nursery, her face obscured, watching silently as I rocked a baby that had grown in another woman's body, but would be nurtured by my heart. I woke at dawn, tears dampening my pillow, the dream's message clear. Carrie had never truly been mine to keep. Perhaps she had never been mine to lose either. Days passed like waves against the shore, rhythmic, relentless, gradually reshaping the landscape of my new life. I established routines in the cottage, morning walks along the beach, afternoons reading books I'd postponed for years, evenings watching sunsets paint the sky in colors I'd forgotten existed. 1 week after Carrie's call, Sarah texted. She went to the house, spent hours there, left looking shell-shocked, no contact since. I stared at those words, imagining Carrie at our dining room table, surrounded by the evidence of her origins. The birth certificate naming Julia Reed as her biological mother, the letters between Julia and Richard, documenting their brief affair and her subsequent pregnancy, the legal adoption papers I'd signed when Carrie was 6 months old, the financial records showing the second mortgage, the depleted retirement accounts, the credit card debt I'd accumulated, ensuring she wanted for nothing. Had she read my letter? Opened the jewelry box with her grandmother's sapphires? Did she understand now that I had chosen her, over and over again, when I had no biological obligation to do so? Or had she seen only betrayal in those documents, proof that her entire life was built on a foundation of secrets? I didn't respond to Sarah's text. Some journeys had to be walked alone, and Carrie was taking her first steps on a path I couldn't, shouldn't, navigate for her. 2 more weeks passed. May turned to June, bringing warmer temperatures and tourists to the small coastal town. I found part-time work at a local bookshop, using my literature background without the pressure of academia. The owner, Grace, was a silver-haired woman who asked few questions but offered gentle company during quiet afternoons when customers were scarce. "Someone called for you yesterday," she mentioned one morning as we unpacked a shipment of new releases. "Young woman, wouldn't leave a name, said she'd try your cell." My heart skipped. "Did she say anything else?" Grace shook her head. "Just asked if you worked here." I said yes, but gave no details. Seemed right, given your situation. I'd told Grace nothing specific, just that I was taking a sabbatical after a family situation. But her kind eyes held the wisdom of someone who recognized a woman in the midst of reinvention. That night, I turned my phone on for the first time in days. There were messages from colleagues, a few from friends, but nothing from Carrie. I was about to power it off again when it rang in my hand. Sarah's number. "Trevor left her," she said immediately. "Apparently he's been planning an exit since her funds dried up, but waited until after her birthday party to make it official." "She still had the party?" I asked, surprised that Carrie could maintain social appearances while her life imploded. Scaled down, but yes, from what I gather, he convinced her to spend the last of her accessible money on it, promising some investment would pay off right after. Classic con. The day after the party, he cleared out his things and ghosted her. The maternal instinct to protect, to rush back and help Carrie pick up the pieces, surged within me. I tamped it down. How is she handling it? Hard to say. Her social media's gone dark. No posts in over a week, which is unprecedented for her. She's been evicted from the apartment. I offered my guest room, but she refused. Where is she staying? Alarm crept into my voice. With a college friend for now. Sarah hesitated. She's been asking questions about Julia. I think she might be trying to find her. The news hit me like a physical blow. Of course Carrie would want to find her biological mother now, the woman who had given birth to her and then disappeared, a mirror image of what I had done, albeit under vastly different circumstances. Should I come back? I asked, suddenly uncertain of the path I'd chosen. No, Sarah replied firmly. This is her journey now, Deanna. You gave her the truth. Let her find her way through it. After hanging up, I walked to the beach, watching stars emerge above the darkening ocean. Somewhere, under the same sky, my daughter was rebuilding her understanding of herself, of me, of Richard, of the family we'd created from complicated beginnings. Was she angry, hurt, relieved to finally understand the subtle wrongness she might have sensed but never named? I thought of Julia, whom I'd met only twice, once when she told Richard about the pregnancy, once when she handed over their newborn daughter. She had been young, ambitious, wholly uninterested in motherhood. Had those feelings changed with time? Would she welcome Carrie into her life if found, or reject her a second time? The protective impulse rose again, stronger. I should go back, shield Carrie from another potential abandonment, help her process this seismic shift in her identity. But then I remembered her words. The best birthday present would be you disappearing from my life. Some gifts, once given, cannot be taken back. Summer settled over the Maine coast like a warm blanket. I established routines that anchored my days. Morning swims in the ocean, afternoons at the bookshop, evenings writing in a journal I'd started to process my evolving emotions. The cottage began to feel less like an escape and more like a sanctuary, a place where I could rediscover the woman who had existed before motherhood consumed my identity. In July, Sarah visited, bringing news from New York like offerings from a world I'd once inhabited. She's working, Sarah said as we walked along the shore, waves lapping at our ankles. Actually working, not the performative role she had at that PR firm, waitressing at a restaurant in Brooklyn. I absorbed this information, trying to picture Carrie, with her designer sensibilities and carefully maintained manicure, carrying plates and taking orders. Is she okay? I asked, the question inadequate for all I wanted to know. She's different, Sarah replied thoughtfully. Quieter, less concerned with appearances. She sold most of her luxury items to cover debts Trevor left behind. She glanced at me. She's been seeing a therapist, twice a week. That's good, I said, genuine relief washing through me. Carrie had always rejected my suggestions of therapy after Richard died, insisting she was fine, even as her behavior grew increasingly materialistic and distant. She asks about you, Sarah added, bending to pick up a shell. Not directly, but in roundabout ways. How you were when she was little. What your marriage to Richard was like before. Before Julia, I finished. Yes. Sarah handed me the perfect scallop shell she'd found. She tracked Julia down, by the way. My step faltered. And? They met for coffee. Once, Julia was civil but distant, from what Carrie said. Made it clear she has no interest in playing mother now. The knot of anxiety I'd carried for months loosened slightly. Not because I was glad Julia had rejected Carrie. No mother would wish such pain on her child, biological or not, but because my deepest fear had been that Carrie would find in Julia the perfect mother figure to replace me, without the complicated history of secrets and sacrifice. That must have hurt her, I said. I think it clarified things, actually. Sarah gazed out at the horizon. She said something interesting afterward. At least my mom chose me, even if she lied about it. First time I've heard her call you Mom since you left. That night, after Sarah departed for New York, I sat on the porch watching stars emerge above the water. The shell Sarah had given me rested in my palm, its delicate ridges and perfect symmetry, a natural wonder. Like motherhood, I thought, a common miracle that nonetheless transformed everything it touched. August brought a heat wave and a letter forwarded by Sarah. I recognized Carrie's handwriting immediately, the distinctive slant of her letters, the precise way she formed her G's and I's. For days, I carried it unopened, both longing for and dreading its contents. Finally, one evening as thunder rumbled in the distance, I opened the envelope. Mom, I don't know where to begin. The things I discovered in those documents, about Julia, about you and Dad, about who I am, have forced me to re-examine everything I thought I knew about my life. At first, I was furious. How could you keep this from me? How could you and Dad build our family on a lie? I felt betrayed, lost, like my entire identity had been constructed on a false foundation. But as weeks passed, and especially after meeting Julia, did Sarah tell you? I've started to understand something. DNA doesn't make a mother. Choosing to love someone day after day through tantrums and teenage rebellion and ungratefulness, that's what makes a mother. Julia gave birth to me, but she never wanted me. You had every reason to walk away, from Dad, from me, from the painful reminder of his betrayal, but you didn't. You chose me again and again, even when I gave you every reason to stop choosing me. The financial records you left shocked me most of all. I never realized what you sacrificed to maintain the lifestyle I demanded. The second mortgage on the house, the loans, your retirement, depleted for my tuition. All while I treated you like an ATM, like your only value was what you could provide materially. I've been seeing someone, a therapist. She's helping me understand how entitled I'd become, how I used material things to fill an emptiness I couldn't name. Maybe I always sensed, somehow, that part of my story was missing, and tried to fill that void with possessions, with Trevor's validation, with a curated online persona that had nothing to do with who I really am. I don't know if you can forgive me for how I've treated you. I'm not sure I deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to become someone worthy of the sacrifices you made, someone who understands that real love isn't about what you can get, but what you're willing to give. I miss you, Mom. Not your money or what you could do for me, but you, your wisdom, your quiet strength, the way you always smelled like books and coffee. Whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd like to start again. Love, Carrie P.S. The sapphires are beautiful. I keep them in their box, a reminder of a legacy I haven't yet earned. Tears blurred my vision as thunder cracked overhead and rain began to fall, nature's percussion accompanying the earthquake in my heart. The letter changed everything and nothing. In the days that followed, I carried Carrie's words with me like a talisman, rereading them until the paper grew soft along its creases. Her acknowledgement of my sacrifices, her recognition of her own entitled behavior. These were the validations I'd never allowed myself to seek, believing that true maternal love demanded uncomplaining sacrifice. And yet, I didn't immediately pack my bags and return to New York. Something held me back, not anger or resentment, but a dawning realization that our relationship could never heal if we simply resumed our old patterns. Carrie was finding herself without the financial safety net I'd always provided. I was rediscovering the woman I'd been before motherhood became my defining characteristic. We both needed to complete these journeys before attempting to build something new between us. So I wrote back, a long letter detailing my own regrets and revelations. How I'd enabled her dependency out of guilt over the circumstances of her birth. How Richard and I had planned to tell her the truth when she was 18, but his sudden death had left me terrified of losing her too. How my love for her had always been real, even when the narrative of our family contained deliberate omissions. I ended with an invitation, not to resume our old relationship, but to begin building a new one, based on honesty and mutual respect rather than guilt and obligation. Summer faded into autumn. The tourists departed, leaving Ogunquit peaceful and windswept. I continued working at the bookshop, finding unexpected joy in recommending novels to the locals, who became regular customers. Grace offered me more responsibility, including organizing a series of author readings that drew surprisingly large crowds for a small coastal town in the off-season. Sarah kept me updated on Carrie's progress. She'd moved into a small apartment in Brooklyn that she could afford on her waitressing salary. She'd cut ties with the friends who disappeared when her lifestyle changed. Most surprisingly, she'd enrolled in community college courses in social work, a field so removed from her previous aspirations that I almost didn't believe it until Sarah forwarded a picture of Carrie's student ID. We exchanged emails and occasional phone calls, cautious at first, then gradually more open. I told her about my life in Maine, the bookshop, the friends I'd made, the peace I'd found in simplicity. She shared stories from her restaurant job, her classes, her therapy sessions. We were getting to know each other as adults, without the complicated dynamics that had defined our relationship for so long. In November, Carrie asked if she could visit for Thanksgiving. I agreed, both excited and apprehensive about this next step. The day before her arrival, I found myself obsessively cleaning the cottage, rearranging books, buying groceries for elaborate meals, falling back into the caretaking role I'd always assumed with her. Catching myself mid-frenzy, I put down the cleaning supplies and walked to the beach. The November wind whipped my hair around my face as I reminded myself that this visit wasn't about proving my worth through perfect housekeeping or gourmet meals. This was about two women seeing each other clearly, perhaps for the first time. Carrie arrived on Thanksgiving morning, stepping off the bus with a single duffel bag and an uncertain smile. The physical transformation was startling. Gone were the designer clothes and professionally highlighted hair. This Carrie wore jeans and a simple sweater, her natural brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. But more striking was the change in her eyes, the entitled hardness replaced by something softer, more vulnerable, yet somehow stronger. "Hi, Mom," she said. The familiar greeting now waited with new understanding. We hugged awkwardly, then more genuinely, holding each other on that windy street corner as passengers disembarked around us. The cottage felt smaller with two people, but not uncomfortably so. We moved around each other carefully at first, then with increasing ease as we prepared the simple Thanksgiving meal I'd planned. Roast chicken instead of turkey, fresh bread from the local bakery, vegetables from the farmer's market. "No marshmallow sweet potatoes?" Carrie asked, a hint of their absence the only reference to our elaborate holiday traditions of the past. "I thought we might start some new traditions," I replied. That evening, after dinner, we sat on the porch bundled in blankets against the November chill, watching stars emerge above the ocean. The silence between us was comfortable, no longer charged with unspoken resentments or expectations. "I found some of Julia's research papers online," Carrie said eventually. "She's brilliant, distinguished professor of economics now." I tensed slightly, uncertain where this was leading. "I can see why Dad was attracted to her," she continued. "They probably had that in common. The analytical mind, the ambition." She glanced at me. "But you know what she doesn't have? The capacity to love someone else's child as her own, to choose family over ego. Carrie, you don't need to." "I do, though." She turned to face me fully. "Meeting Julia helped me understand what real motherhood is. She gave birth to me, but you gave me everything else. A home, values, unconditional love, even when I was profoundly unlovable." Tears threatened, but I held them back. "I made mistakes too. Keeping the truth from you for so long was wrong," she acknowledged. "But I understand why you did it. You were trying to protect me in your way, just like I was trying to protect myself by building a life around things that couldn't reject me." The rest of Thanksgiving weekend unfolded with a delicate balance of honesty and care. We walked the deserted beaches, explored the small-town shops, and spent evenings by the fireplace talking in a way we never had before. As equals, each with our own wounds and wisdom to share. Carrie told me about her first meeting with Julia, the awkward coffee date where her biological mother had been polite but distant, making it clear she had no interest in a relationship. "She kept checking her watch," Carrie said, as if meeting the daughter she gave away was just another appointment to get through. I held back my instinctive defense of the woman, that not everyone is equipped for motherhood, that Julia had at least made the responsible choice to give Carrie to people who wanted her rather than raising her resentfully. Instead, I listened, allowing Carrie to process the rejection in her own way. In turn, I shared stories I'd never told her, about the early days after bringing her home from the hospital, my initial struggle to bond with the living embodiment of Richard's infidelity. The moment that struggle ended when she'd gripped my finger with her tiny hand and stared into my eyes with complete trust. "I should have told you the truth when you were old enough to understand," I admitted. "After your father died, I was so afraid of losing you too." I thought if you knew you weren't biologically mine, you might reject me. I might have, Carrie acknowledged with surprising self-awareness, especially during my rebellious phase. I was looking for reasons to push you away even without knowing about Julia. Why? I asked, the question that had haunted me for years. She considered this, staring into the fire. I think I always sensed something was off. Not with your love. That was constant. But there was this undercurrent I couldn't name. The way Dad would sometimes look at us both with this expression of, I don't know, gratitude mixed with guilt. The way certain family medical history questions made you change the subject. She twisted a strand of hair around her finger, a habit from childhood that I hadn't seen in years. When you don't have explanations for those disconnects, you make up your own. I decided it must be that I wasn't good enough, or that you were hiding disappointment in me. So I tried to make myself immune to your approval by acting like I didn't need it. On Sunday, as Carrie prepared to return to New York, we stood awkwardly in the cottage's small entryway, both aware that this visit had marked a turning point, but uncertain what came next. You're not coming back, are you? She asked. To New York, I mean. Not permanently. The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on healing our relationship that I hadn't fully articulated my own future plans, even to myself. I don't know, I answered honestly. This place has become important to me. I found something here I didn't know I was missing. She nodded, no trace of the entitlement that would once have demanded my return to accommodate her needs. I think I understand. You're building a life that's about you, not just about being my mom. That doesn't mean I don't want you in it, I added quickly. I know. She smiled, a genuine expression free from the calculated charm she'd once wielded like a weapon. But maybe we both need separate, healthy lives before we can really be part of each other's. As the bus pulled away, carrying my daughter back to her new life in Brooklyn, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, pride in her growth, hope for our future, and a bittersweet acknowledgement that our relationship would never return to what it had been. Perhaps that was for the best. Winter descended on Maine with theatrical flair. Blizzards, ice storms, and crystalline days when sunshine on snow created a brightness almost too intense to bear. I continued working at the bookshop, began volunteering at the local library, and even dated briefly. A divorced fisherman named Jack, who shared my love of literature, but ultimately wanted more commitment than I was ready to give. Carrie and I established a new pattern of communication: weekly phone calls, regular emails, occasional care packages exchanged by mail. She sent me photographs of her life in Brooklyn, her tiny apartment decorated with secondhand furniture, her classmates from the social work program, the community garden where she'd claimed a small plot. I sent her seashells, local maple syrup, and books I thought she might enjoy, gifts chosen for thoughtfulness rather than monetary value. In February, she called with unexpected news. I've been offered an internship, she said, her voice brimming with an excitement I hadn't heard in years. At a women's shelter in Boston. It's unpaid, but one of my professors recommended me specifically. A pause. I thought, since Boston's only 2 hours from Ogunquit, maybe I could find an affordable apartment somewhere between, commute to the internship, and see you more often? The old instinct arose immediately, to offer financial support, to solve her problems, to smooth her path. I tamped it down. That sounds like a wonderful opportunity. Have you looked into housing options? I've been researching options, Carrie replied. There are some shared houses in Portsmouth that might work with my budget. It would be about an hour to Boston and 30 minutes to you. That sounds sensible, I said, pride blooming at her practical approach. The old Carrie would have found the cheapest apartment in the most expensive neighborhood, then expected me to cover the shortfall. This new version was building her life within her means. I'd need to stay somewhere while I look at places, though, she ventured. Maybe with you? Just for a week or so? Of course, I said, genuinely pleased at the prospect. Our Thanksgiving visit had been healing but brief. This would give us more time to continue rebuilding our relationship, stone by patient stone. In March, Carrie arrived with 2 suitcases and a determined expression. The winter had been harsh that year, and though calendar spring had technically arrived, stubborn patches of snow still clung to the shadows, and the wind carried a biting chill. Not exactly the coastal paradise I imagined, she joked, as we unloaded her bags from the taxi. Wait until June, I promised. It transforms completely. The cottage felt different with Carrie, as a semi-permanent resident rather than a visitor. We established routines. I took morning shifts at the bookshop while she searched for apartments online and scheduled viewings. Evenings, we cooked together and talked about her upcoming internship, her studies, my growing responsibilities at the bookstore. We were learning to exist in the same space without the old dynamics asserting themselves, no longer caretaker and dependent, but two adults with separate lives that had room for connection. During her second week, as we walked along the winter-ravaged beach, she brought up the topic we'd largely avoided since Thanksgiving. "I've been thinking about Dad a lot lately," she said, hands buried deep in her coat pockets against the chill. "About what he knew, what choices he made." I nodded, giving her space to continue. "He never treated me differently, did he? Even knowing I wasn't biologically yours?" "Never," I assured her. "From the moment he brought you home, you were his daughter in every way that mattered. He adored you." "But he wanted to tell me the truth," she said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes, he believed you had a right to know your origins. We argued about it several times as you got older." I picked up a smooth stone, turning it over in my gloved hands. "He thought we should tell you when you were 16. I was the one who insisted on waiting." "Why?" No accusation in her voice, just genuine curiosity. I thought carefully about my answer, wanting to give her the complete truth she deserved. "Partly to protect you, as I've said, but also, selfishly, to protect myself. I was afraid that if you knew you weren't biologically mine, it might change how you saw me, that I'd become secondary somehow. Instead, keeping the secret created distance anyway," she observed. "Yes," I acknowledged. "I can see that now." The energy it took to maintain that fiction, it affected everything, created this undercurrent of tension neither of us could name. We walked in silence for a while, the rhythmic crash of waves punctuating our thoughts. "After I met Julia," Carrie finally said, "I kept thinking about how DNA is just instructions, chemical coding. It determines eye color and health risks, but not who will sit beside your hospital bed when you're sick, or who will celebrate your achievements, or forgive your worst behavior." She looked at me directly. "Those things aren't inherited. They're chosen. You chose all of that, even when I made it incredibly difficult." Tears pricked my eyes despite the cold wind. "I would choose it again," I said simply. By the end of March, Carrie had found a small apartment in Portsmouth, with a reasonable rent and 2 roommates, graduate students who kept similar hours and shared her newfound appreciation for simplicity. I helped her move in, carefully maintaining the boundary between supportive and over-involved. When she mentioned needing dishes and basic furniture, I bit back the impulse to reach for my credit card, instead suggesting secondhand shops where I'd found good deals for the cottage. The night before her internship began, we had dinner at a small restaurant halfway between our homes. Neutral territory for this new chapter. "Are you nervous?" I asked as she fidgeted with her napkin. "Terrified," she admitted with a laugh. "What if I'm terrible at this? What if all those women see through me immediately? The former princess trying to play social worker." "You're not playing at anything," I said firmly. "You're reinventing yourself based on hard-earned wisdom. That's something the women you'll be working with might actually understand better than most." She considered this, then nodded. "I never thought about it that way. We've all had to start over for different reasons." Spring crept tentatively into southern Maine, transforming the landscape with deliberate patience. Much like Carrie's internship and my own evolving life, the change wasn't dramatic or sudden, but accumulated in small daily shifts. Wildflowers pushing through thawing ground, birds returning with their dawn chorus, daylight stretching longer into the evening. April brought unexpected news from New York. Sarah called one morning as I was preparing to open the bookshop. "Julia Reed is looking for Carrie," she said without preamble. "She showed up at my office yesterday." I gripped the phone tighter. What did she want? To reconnect, apparently. Said their coffee meeting left her with unresolved feelings, and that she's in a different place now, regarding motherhood. Sarah's tone made her skepticism clear. She asked if I knew how to reach Carrie. And? My protective instinct flared immediately. I said I'd pass along her contact information if Carrie wanted it. Nothing more. A pause. "Should I tell her, Deanna?" I closed my eyes, forcing down the surge of fear. This was exactly the scenario I'd dreaded for 24 years. Julia returning, wanting the daughter she'd once abandoned, potentially replacing me in Carrie's heart. "Yes," I said finally. It has to be Carrie's choice. We can't keep making decisions about her relationship with Julia without her knowledge. After hanging up, I stood in my kitchen, hands braced against the counter as I processed the implications. Julia's reappearance felt like a test of everything Carrie and I had built over the past months. The honesty, the careful boundaries, the new appreciation for each other beyond the biological connection we lacked. That evening, I called Carrie. We'd settled into a routine of twice-weekly calls, respecting each other's separate lives while maintaining our growing connection. She answered on the third ring, her voice tired but satisfied after a long day at the shelter. "Julia contacted Sarah," I said, after our usual exchange of pleasantries. "She's asking to see you again." The silence stretched so long I thought we'd lost the connection. "Carrie? I'm here," she replied, her voice carefully neutral. "Did Sarah give her my information?" "No. She wanted to check with you first." Another pause. "What do you think I should do?" The question was a landmine. The old me would have discouraged the meeting, found subtle ways to highlight Julia's abandonment, protected my position as Carrie's real mother. But that approach had led us to the breaking point that caused our separation in the first place. "I think that's entirely your decision," I said carefully. "You're an adult. Your relationship with Julia, whether you want one or not, is yours to define. But how would you feel if I met with her again?" I took a deep breath, choosing complete honesty over protective half-truths. "Scared," I admitted. "Afraid that she might try to claim a relationship she hasn't earned, that you might be hurt again if her interest proves temporary, that I swallowed hard, that I might become less important to you." "Mom," she said, the word now weighted with deeper meaning than before. "Meeting Julia the first time made me appreciate you more, not less. She gave birth to me, but you're my mother. Nothing will change that." Tears pricked my eyes. "Thank you for saying that." "It's not just saying it, it's the truth." I heard her take a breath. "I think I will meet her, though. There are questions I have that only she can answer. Medical history, for one thing. And I want to understand why she's reaching out now, after all this time." "That makes sense," I said, meaning it despite my lingering anxiety. "Just be careful with your expectations. I've learned that lesson pretty thoroughly this year, don't you think?" A touch of wry humor colored her voice. "My expectations nearly cost me the most important relationship in my life." After we hung up, I walked to the beach, watching the last light fade from the sky as I contemplated this latest development. Intellectually, I knew Carrie's decision to meet Julia again was healthy and reasonable. Emotionally, I couldn't help feeling threatened, as if our hard-won reconciliation might be jeopardized by Julia's reappearance. Was this another test of my ability to love Carrie without possessiveness, to support her choices even when they scared me, to trust that our bond was strong enough to withstand Julia's renewed interest? Carrie met with Julia the following weekend in Boston. She called me immediately afterward, her voice thoughtful but calm. "She's writing a book," Carrie explained, "about women in academia and the choices they make regarding career versus family. Our story, her pregnancy, her decision to give me to Dad, is part of it." "I see," I said, unsurprised that Julia's renewed interest had a practical motivation. "How do you feel about that?" "Conflicted. Part of me thinks it's convenient that she only wanted to reconnect when it served her professional interests, but another part understands she's trying to make sense of her choices, just like we all are." May arrived with a profusion of wildflowers and warming temperatures. The tourists would soon return to Ogunquit, transforming the quiet coastal town into a bustling vacation destination. I found myself thinking about the future in a way I hadn't since arriving nearly a year earlier. Not just days or weeks ahead, but months, years. Would I stay in Maine permanently? Return to teaching? Forge some new path entirely? Grace, sensing my contemplation, broached the subject one quiet afternoon in the bookshop. "School year's ending soon," she remarked casually as we unpacked a shipment of summer reading titles. "Any thoughts about going back to your university position?" "They've filled it," I replied, arranging novels on a display table. "I officially resigned in January." She nodded, unsurprised. "And how do you feel about that?" I considered the question seriously. Lighter, actually. Academia was fulfilling, but there was always this pressure. Publish or perish, compete for grants, navigate departmental politics. Here, I gestured around the cozy bookshop with its worn wooden floors and sun-dappled shelves. "There's a simplicity I've come to value. You've changed since you arrived, Grace observed. Less wound up, more present. Motherhood defined me for so long, I said. Even when Carrie was grown, I was still primarily her mother, her support system, her financial safety net. Stepping away forced both of us to redefine ourselves. And how is that going? With Carrie? I smiled, thinking of our most recent visit the previous weekend. She'd shown me around her apartment in Portsmouth with obvious pride, introducing her roommates and cooking dinner for me. A simple pasta dish, but one she'd prepared entirely herself. Better than I could have imagined, I admitted. We're building something new together, something healthier. The truth was, Carrie's transformation continued to astonish me. The entitled young woman who had once sneered at my basic lifestyle was now embracing simplicity with genuine enthusiasm. Her internship at the women's shelter had evolved into a part-time paid position alongside her studies. She'd started a small savings account, managed her modest budget carefully, and even begun paying back small amounts toward the educational loans I'd taken out on her behalf, something I'd never requested but which she insisted upon as part of her accountability process, a term she'd picked up in therapy. In late May, Carrie called with news that would further test our evolving relationship. "Julia wants me to contribute to her book," she said. "My perspective on being raised by you, discovering the truth about my origins, reconnecting with her. She's offering payment." I absorbed this information carefully, aware of my instinctive resistance, but determined not to let old patterns dictate my response. "How do you feel about it?" "Conflicted," she admitted. "The money would help with school expenses, and part of me thinks it might be therapeutic to articulate my experience from my own perspective rather than having her interpret it." "But," I prompted, hearing the hesitation in her voice, "but I worry about how it might affect you. Our story isn't just mine to tell. It's yours too. And while Julia is approaching this as an academic case study, for us, it's our actual lives." Her consideration of my feelings, so different from the self-centered demands of a year ago, touched me deeply. "I appreciate that, Carrie, but I don't want to stand in the way of something that might be beneficial for you. What if we did it together?" she suggested suddenly. "Not for Julia's book, but something separate. Our story, from both perspectives. What it means to be mother and daughter beyond biology. How we broke and then rebuilt our relationship." The idea caught me off guard. "You mean, write our own book? Why not? You're the literature professor. I'm studying narrative therapy techniques in my social work program. We both have something to say about family, truth, forgiveness." As summer fully arrived in Maine, Carrie and I began working on what we called the project, meeting weekly at a cafe halfway between our homes, sharing written pieces, discussing painful memories and new insights with an honesty that would have been impossible a year earlier. The process was sometimes difficult, but always illuminating, forcing us both to examine our choices, acknowledge our mistakes, and recognize the love that had sustained us through it all. 1 year to the day after I'd left the letter and documents on my dining room table, we met at the cottage to mark the anniversary. The Maine coast was in full summer glory, sailboats dotting the blue horizon, gardens bursting with color, sunshine warming the weathered boards of the porch where we sat with glasses of lemonade. "I've been thinking about what you said that day," Carrie remarked, watching the ocean, "that the best birthday present would be me disappearing from your life." I winced at the memory. "Carrie, you don't need to—" "No, let me finish," she interrupted gently. "You gave me exactly what I asked for, but not in the way I expected. You disappeared physically, but for the first time, you were truly present in my life through those documents, those truths. By leaving, you forced me to see you clearly, not as the ATM I'd reduced you to, but as a woman who chose to love me when she had every reason not to." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small wrapped package. "This is a year late, but happy unbirthday, Mom." Inside was a simple silver frame containing a photograph I'd never seen, Richard holding newborn Carrie, looking at her with pure adoration, while I stood beside them, my expression a complex mixture of uncertainty, determination, and nascent love. "Where did you find this?" I asked, throat tight with emotion. "In Dad's old albums. I think Aunt Sarah took it the day you brought me home from the hospital." Carrie's fingers traced the edge of the frame. "It's us at the beginning, the moment you chose to be my mother, before you even knew if you could love me." "I did love you," I said softly. Not immediately, perhaps, but fully, completely, once I allowed myself to. I know, she replied, and that's what makes you my real mother. Not obligation or biology, but choice. Daily, difficult choice. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in impossible colors, I realized that my greatest gift to Carrie hadn't been financial support or material comfort, but the courage to disappear when she needed to find herself, and the patience to return when she was ready to truly see me. Some journeys require separation before reunion is possible. Some truths must break us before they can heal us. Some loves are proven not by what we give, but by what we're willing to let go. The cottage had never looked more beautiful than it did on this June evening, its weathered shingles glowing gold in the setting sun, gardens bursting with early summer blooms. Strings of white lights crisscrossed the backyard, transforming the space into an enchanted wonderland. Laughter and conversation drifted through the open windows as I put the finishing touches on a tray of hors d'oeuvres in the kitchen. "Mom, they're here!" Carrie called from the front porch. I smoothed my dress, a simple linen shift rather than the formal wear I once would have chosen for such an occasion, and joined her outside. A taxi was pulling up, and from it emerged Sarah, elegant as always despite her now fully silver hair, accompanied by Grace from the bookshop and several of my former university colleagues who had made the journey to Maine. "The guest of honor arrives at last," Sarah announced, embracing me warmly. "Though I still don't understand why you insisted on preparing everything yourself when this party is supposed to be celebrating you." "Some habits die hard," I replied with a smile. The occasion was the publication of The Choice, the book Carrie and I had spent the past 3 years writing together. What had begun as casual conversations over coffee had evolved into a full memoir, a dual narrative exploring our complicated journey through secrets, estrangement, and reconciliation. To our surprise and delight, a respected publishing house had picked it up, praising its honest examination of mother-daughter relationships beyond biological connection. More cars arrived, disgorging guests onto the shell-strewn driveway. Carrie's roommates from Portsmouth, now close friends. My neighbors from town. The small, close-knit community I'd built in Maine alongside the relationships I'd maintained from my previous life. Two worlds merging seamlessly as twilight softened the coastal landscape. I found myself watching Carrie as she moved through the crowd, greeting guests with genuine warmth. At 29, she had blossomed into a woman of substance and compassion. Her hair, now worn in its natural brown rather than the artificial blonde she'd once favored, was pulled back in a simple knot. Her dress was elegant but understated, her only jewelry a pair of small sapphire earrings that had been part of her grandmother's set, chosen not for show, but for their connection to family history. After completing her social work degree, she had secured a position at a family services organization in Portsmouth, specializing in supporting adoptive families and children in foster care. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, that her own experience had uniquely qualified her to help others navigate the complex emotions surrounding non-biological family connections. "Your mother would be proud," said a voice beside me. I turned to find Julia Reed, the woman who had given birth to Carrie 29 years earlier. Our relationship had evolved over the years into something neither of us could have anticipated. Not friendship exactly, but a mutual respect built on our shared connection to Carrie. "Thank you for coming," I said sincerely. "It means a lot to her that you're here." Julia nodded, her gaze following mine to where Carrie stood chatting with guests. "Your book is extraordinary," she said. "It must have been difficult to be so vulnerable on the page." "Terrifying," I admitted, "but necessary for both of us." After our initial work together on the project, Carrie had approached Julia about contributing her perspective. To my surprise, Julia had declined to participate directly, but had offered her blessing for us to share the complete story, including her role in it. "Some stories belong to those who lived them most fully," she'd told Carrie. "This one belongs to you and Deanna." Julia's book on women's choices in academia had been published 2 years earlier, with only a brief, anonymized reference to her experience giving up a child while pursuing her career. She had sent us both signed copies with a note that read simply, "Different choices, different paths, all valid." "Shall we join the others?" I suggested, gesturing toward the backyard where tables had been set up beneath the twinkling lights. The evening unfolded like a dream. Dinner under the stars, toasts offered by friends both old and new, laughter that carried across the gentle summer air. Grace had arranged for the local bookshop to sell copies of The Choice, and to my amazement, a line formed as guests purchased books for us to sign. "To think," Sarah murmured as she watched us signing, "that the worst day of your life would eventually lead to this." I thought back to that devastating moment in Carrie's apartment, hearing her wish for my disappearance. The pain had been unbearable then, but from that breaking point had come a rebuilding neither of us could have imagined. As the night deepened and guests began to depart, I found myself sitting on the porch steps with Carrie, both of us barefoot, shoes abandoned hours earlier. "I have something to tell you," she said, twisting the stem of her wine glass between her fingers. "I've been waiting for the right moment." "Good news or bad news?" I asked, recognizing the mixture of excitement and nervousness in her expression. "Good, I think." She took a deep breath. "I've been approved to become a foster parent. Single, so it's taken longer, but I got the call yesterday." Joy and pride swept through me in equal measure. "Carrie, that's wonderful. When?" "They have a 12-year-old girl who needs placement. Difficult case. She's been in the system a while, has trust issues, pushes people away." Carrie's eyes met mine, a world of understanding passing between us. "Sound familiar?" "A bit," I acknowledged with a smile. "Are you nervous?" "Terrified," she admitted. "What if I can't connect with her? What if I make all the wrong choices? What if she never trusts me?" I placed my hand over hers. "You have something invaluable to offer this child, something many foster parents don't have. You understand what it means to build family bonds that aren't based on DNA. You've lived it from both sides now." She nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about what you wrote in the book, about how true motherhood isn't a biological fact, but a daily choice, how you had to consciously choose me every day until love became instinct." "It didn't take long," I assured her. "Just those first difficult weeks when you were a living reminder of painful things. After that," I shrugged, "you were simply my daughter." "I want to do that for Mia," she said, using the girl's name for the first time. "Choose her every day until she believes someone can. Even if she never calls me mom, even if she's only with me temporarily, I want to be the adult who proves some people will stay." Later that night, after all the guests had departed, and Carrie had gone to bed in her old room in the cottage, now hers whenever she wanted it, I sat alone on the porch, watching stars emerge above the dark ocean. 5 years ago, I had fled to this place in pain and confusion, certain only that I could no longer continue in a relationship that diminished us both. Never could I have imagined the journey that would follow, the painful truths that had to be confronted, the gradual rebuilding of trust, the unexpected joy of knowing my daughter as an adult woman of substance and compassion, or that the greatest act of motherly love would be not sacrifice, but honesty, the courage to reveal painful truths and allow Carrie to find her own way through them. The book we had written together sat on the table beside me, its cover showing a beach with 2 sets of footprints, one larger, one smaller, walking parallel to the water's edge, not hand in hand, not one following the other, but side by side, separate yet connected. Inside, our alternating chapters told the story from both perspectives: the mother who chose to love a child not biologically hers, the daughter who had to lose that mother temporarily to truly appreciate her worth. Early reviews had been surprisingly positive, with particular praise for our unflinching examination of difficult truths, how secrets, even those kept with the best intentions, create invisible barriers, how financial support can become a substitute for emotional connection, how 2 people can experience the same event so differently. Most gratifying were the letters already arriving from readers who saw themselves in our story: adoptive parents, estranged adult children, families rebuilding after secrets had torn them apart. "You put words to feelings I've carried my entire life," one woman wrote. "For the first time, I feel understood." A sound from the cottage drew my attention. Carrie, standing in the doorway wrapped in a blanket. "Can't sleep?" I asked as she joined me on the porch swing. "Too much excitement. And I keep thinking about Mia, about what her first night with me will be like." I smiled, remembering the anxiety I'd felt bringing newborn Carrie home from the hospital, the terror that I wouldn't know how to love her properly, the fear that she would somehow sense I wasn't her biological mother. It will be awkward and terrifying and eventually wonderful, I told her. Just like all the most important relationships in life. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the moonlight play across the ocean. The painful past that had once threatened to destroy us had been transformed into something precious, a hard-won wisdom that Carrie would now carry forward to another child in need of chosen love. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Taking me in after what Dad did? All those years of sacrifice?" "Never," I said without hesitation. "Not even during our worst times. Loving you changed me, Carrie. Made me more than I would have been without you." She leaned her head against my shoulder, a gesture so natural now, but one that would have been unthinkable in those last bitter months before our separation. "I'm going to make mistakes with Mia," she said softly. "I know that, but I hope I can give her what you eventually gave me, the truth, even when it's painful, the space to become herself, even when it's scary to let go. The knowledge that family isn't just about who gave birth to you, but who chooses to stand beside you day after day." In the distance, the lighthouse beam swept across the water, a steady pulse of light guiding ships safely to shore. I thought about the journey Carrie and I had taken, from the broken relationship that had prompted my disappearance to this moment of deep connection. The path had not been straight or easy, but each difficult step had led us here, to a truth more complex and beautiful than the comfortable lies we'd lived with for so long. As Carrie drifted to sleep against my shoulder, I watched the stars wheel overhead and felt a profound peace settle over me. The woman who had fled New York 5 years ago, broken by her daughter's rejection, could never have imagined this future. But then, the greatest journeys often begin with a single painful step away from everything familiar. Sometimes we must disappear to be truly seen. Sometimes we must break apart to rebuild something stronger. And sometimes, the greatest gift a mother can give her child is not protection from painful truths, but the courage to face them together, side by side, separate but connected, each walking her own path along the same shore.